Welcome back. In this video, we are going to implement the functionality to add an image here. So to select an image from our storage and then use it in our profile. So for example, I can click on this icon, then it will ask me for permission. I'm just going to allow it for this case. And then I can go ahead and select a photo from the camera. So let's select our Homer once again, and then it will populate the image accordingly, as you can see here. All right, so you should already know how to do that, right? You have seen that multiple times. The thing is, what we will start with is the internet connection, because we also want to have internet rights, so to speak. Of course, also storage rights, as we will use that as well. So let's go over to our Android manifest and use those permissions, or add those permissions here, because as I said, we will need them. And then the rest, you can try to do that pretty much yourself, right? So you know how to do all of the steps that are necessary for this, so you can just pause the video and try to implement that. That will definitely improve your development skills. So you go ahead and try it. All right, so I hope you tried it and were successful. So what I'm gonna use here is the internet. So this is permission number 1. Next, we need a permission for the network state. So network state, this one here, and then the one for external storage. So external storage, and for now we're just reading external storage. We're not going to store anything as of now. If you want to store anything on the external storage, you can of course also add the write external storage permission, but this is going to do it for now. So now let's go over to our profile activity, because here is where the magic will happen. By the way, just a little thing is I want to make sure that my image view has an ID. So I call this circle image view IC or IV user image. Maybe we should make it more precise, because this is the profile user image. Okay, so it's going to be unique now, because I think we used IV user image somewhere else already. So it always makes sense to have IDs as unique values. All right, and as it is with permissions, you maybe recall it makes sense to have constants for the permission codes. So let's go ahead and create a companion object, which will have the private constant value read storage permission code, which will be 1. And then, because we know we will also need the image request code, let's just add that as well. So pick image request code, and let's assign the value 2 to it. All right, so when should anything happen or something happen? Well, as soon as we click on the button, and by the way here, set user data. So now it's of course renamed. So IV profile user image is the new name in the set user data UI. So okay, in our onCreate, we can now go ahead and give our image view an onClick listener. So IV profile user image set onClick listener, so that we can execute some code in here. And of course, what we want to do is we want to check if we have permission already. So if context compat, so here context compat check self permission, and here we ask for the external reading. So here we need to pass in the context, and by the way, let's import context compat just so the error disappears. So we need to pass in the context and then the permission that we want, and we will just get it from manifest permission dot read external, here external storage. All right, and here we also need to import manifest. Would have been easier if we had imported it before, because then it will tell us which one of those is correct or incorrect. Okay, so that is the request that we have, and then of course we want to execute some code in the case that we have this permission, and we of course need to check it, because this is just a check here. Is it permission granted. So here, package manager dot permission granted. So this is always the structure, and I think it makes sense to have it in multiple lines. So we're saying if this here is equal to package manager permission granted. Okay. And if that's the case, then what we want to do is we want to show the image chooser. So we want to select the image pretty much. Otherwise, so in the else case, if we don't have permission, and that's what we can implement before we implement that one. So otherwise we want to ask for permission. So activity compat request permissions, and here permissions. Let's import activity compat here as well. Okay, and then in here we need to first then pass in the activity and then the array of our permissions that we want to ask for. All right, and the one that I'm going to ask for is read external storage, and that's pretty much it. So we need to pass in manifest permission dot read external storage, and then the last parameter here will be the code that we need to pass. All right, so read storage permission code. That's the code that we prepared, of course, in our companion object. Okay, so this one here. As we can potentially ask for multiple permissions, that's why we have those codes, and we also need to pass in the code. So we start with the code 1 here for our read storage permission code. It could have been any number that we wanted. All right, so this is how we request the permission. Now we need to catch permission results. So let's override the on request permission results or permissions result. So we get the request code, we get the permissions, and we get the ground results. All right, so what we can now check is if the request code is equal to our read storage permission code. If that's the case, then we want to check if the grant results is not empty and the grant results at the position 0, because our array could have multiple grant results here. It's an integer array. If that is the package manager dot permission granted. Okay, so I think it's nothing new here, right? I'm just repeating what we've done multiple times already. So basically what we want to do is we want to get permissions, and if we don't have permissions, we want to ask them for them. And if the user didn't give us the permissions, then we want to make sure that he understands that it's important that he gives us those permissions and so forth. Okay, so if that's the case, so if the grant results aren't empty and we have the permission granted, what we want to do is basically the same thing. We want to show our image chooser. So show image chooser, and by the way, the same thing should be done in this if case. So if we already have the permission and we just ask for it. All right, and of course, what should happen if the user didn't give us the permissions that we wanted? So he didn't grant us the permissions. Well, then let's just say you just denied permissions for storage. You can allow it from the settings. All right, so this is basically a little text to let the user know that it's important that we have those rights, or that he can still make changes, but in the settings of the app or for the app in Android itself. All right, and now at this point, what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a new function, private fun show image chooser, and that one should just show or start an intent, right? So let's create a gallery intent, which will be an intent which will have the intent action pick as action. So action pick, and then it should go ahead and use the media store in order to access the images, and then media dot external content URI. And this of course will just open up the functionality so that we can select an image from the storage of the user, or the user can select an image from his own storage. All right. And of course, we want to start that activity with the request of a result, because we want to get a result, which is going to be the data. So the image that we want then to store inside of this little icon here. So this icon, of course. So start activity for result, gallery intent, and we pass in a code, which is our pick image request code. So that's the one that we prepared before in our companion object, so that we can find out which request code it was, because we could have had multiple requests, right? So multiple start activity for results. Okay, now at this point we can of course call this function at the required to do points. So here, when the grant results are given, permission is granted, and of course if we already had the rights to use it, so here in our on click, when we click on the image. Now at this point we need to look at something. The thing is, what we are using is, we're using a functionality to display an image, and we are using a third-party library for it, right? So set user data in UI is where we use Glide. And if we look at Glide, what we can see is that it requires something which is a URI. So this load here, this load function, requires a string which is a URI. Okay, so the location. The URI could be something in the web, but it also can be something on the device. We want to load something from the device, but we need to know where it is. So we ask for the location of it. So when the user selects an image from his phone, it's not like we're copying the image from the phone into the application, but we're just saying, okay, this image has a certain URI, and that's the URI that we want to reuse. And that's the one that we will have to pass in here when we load the image. So now let's go ahead and get that. And therefore I'm going to create a variable. Actually, let me put that underneath the companion object, private var m selected image file URI, which will be of type URI nullable, and a URI can be transferred into a string easily, okay? But I still want to store it as a URI. And now I can go ahead and ask for the activity result. So we prepared this function where we have the image chooser and we start the activity for result. And now of course we want to do something when we get the activity result. So on activity result, and it's this one here, what we want to do is we want to check, is the result code okay? So did it work? Activity dot result okay? And is the request code the one that we prepared? This is the pick image request code, this one here. Is it the same? And is the data that we get something? So is it not null? All right. So that's basically what we need here. We need to get the data. We need to make sure that the test was okay and so forth. Okay. So once we know all of these things are true, what we can do is we can set our m selected image file URI to be data.data. So this data is what we get as a result here from our on activity result. And from there we take the data itself and we store that in a selected image file URI. So if we look at the data, you can see get data returns a URI. And that is beautiful because that's exactly the same type as our m selected image file URI. It's of type URI. Perfect. So at this point you can see that our URI is going to be where the image is. And now what we can do is we can go ahead and use the same functionality where we load the image. So we basically just do the same thing from our glide in here. And of course the data will not be user image, but it will be the selected image file URI. Now the thing is, this could potentially go wrong because we're loading something and so forth. So if you want to make sure that this is gonna work fine, we can put a try and catch around it. That's always a good idea in these cases. So let's have an IO exception here that will be captured or caught, so to speak. Okay, and we're just gonna print it onto the stack trace. All right, and at this point we should be able to test this and it should work on our device. Okay, so there we are. Projet Manage. Now let's go to our profile. My profile. You can see that the image is in there, but it's not brought into the right format. Now let's select it. So first of all, you can see it asks us for permission. We're gonna allow it. And now let's select an image, and I'm gonna use Homer again. But this time you can see it's slightly different. It's not exactly the same image, and it crops it directly for us. All right, so that is it for this video. I hope you managed to get most of this done yourself, or maybe even you get it done completely. That is definitely something that you should strive for. You should always aim for getting stuff done by yourself at this point, or a lot of it at least. And of course, when something new comes in to play, then of course check out how I do it in order to fully understand it. All right, so thanks a lot and see you in the next one.